From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. I am Ben Hall. Good show tonight. We are talking about the mayor's race in Nashville. Also, the recent mayoral debate that was right here on News Channel 5, and a poll that News Channel 5 will be releasing perhaps, I think Monday. Monday we are going to release the results from this poll. So tonight what we are going to do is kind of go over how we put the poll together and also talk with our political analyst about reflections on the debate Monday night. Happy to have with us Pat Nolan. Pat, thank you for being with us.
Good to be here.
Also have with us Berje Yacoubian, our pollster. Thank you, Berje, for being with us.
Pleased to be here.
We can talk all about, people are fascinated by polls, and we're very interested in the work you're doing. This is going to be the first independent poll, really, in this entire race. But Pat, let's start with the debate Monday night. What stood out for you?
Well, it seemed it took a while for the candidates to mix it up. They did eventually do that, and mostly on fiscal issues. I guess one thing that struck me after it was over was David Fox, I don't believe once used his earlier mantra that Megan Barry is way over here on the left and everybody else is with him in the center. And he didn't say that. Now, he did talk a lot about blaming her for things that had not gone right in the city in terms of having a property tax increase, a water sewer rate, and things like that. So they mixed it up on those sort of conservative, liberal kind of things or progressive kind of things, but not as much on that. I was a little surprised that she was as much on the attack, and that has kind of been mirrored in her latest TV ads. She's sort of responding back to some of the things that have been charges against her by David Fox's spouse, who has his current campaign ad up, and also being used by the outside PAC to criticize her. But hers goes further. She actually takes a swipe at what David Fox has done for a living, being a hedge fund manager. And of course, those words are kind of politically charged as well. But they're mixing it up pretty good right now, and I think the debate was a little bit of a sign of that, although it took them a while to get that way. But once they got through, you could sort of see as it's continued to go on, the gloves are off.
The gloves came off most during some financial type questions, discussion over finances. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was an interesting back and forth and really kind of separates the candidates here.
Well, the one thing they did agree about, Ben, was the series that you did on News Channel 5 about
tax increment
financing.
Yeah.
They both seem to think that's something that needs to be reviewed and looked at. So I think that may be a continuing story you look at regardless of who wins the election on September 10th.
Yes, I'm sure we will. And then the notion of, there's been so much talk in this race about Democrat-Republican, but it comes down to a conservative way we're going to move forward with our finances, or maybe a less conservative way. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, you've seen more undercurrent of Republican Democrat in this race than any mayor's race I can remember. But the other interesting thing I'm seeing, and I don't think I've ever quite seen this in a mayor's race in Nashville before, it's the contentiousness of it among the supporters. If you're out on social media, your Facebook feed, your Facebook friends, I've been struck by how many people I've seen who put up postings in favor of one candidate and blasting the other, and how that has created debate among their Facebook friends, pro and con. I mean, I've heard from people that things are going on in this race are beginning to fray and end friendships. I mean, you have a lot of division in this community, and a lot of strong feeling. They always have strong feeling about candidates, but maybe more so than I've seen in this community about this. And maybe just because it's being reflected more in social media, and social media is becoming more prominent in the way we see the world every day.
And before I bring in Berje, why do you think that would be true of this race above what you've seen in past races?
Well, I think you had the two candidates that came out to be in the runoff probably were the ones who most starkly put out their positions. A lot of Megan Barry's ads talked about very strong Democratic themes. There were times in her ads you thought maybe she was running for Congress or the state legislature in a Democratic primary. His spoke to a lot of Republican themes, conservative themes. Now, they're not running as Republicans, they're not running as Democrats. They're both trying to run. She's trying to run as somebody who can build coalitions and bring people together. He's trying to run as a centrist. But increasingly, their supporters and other people are people that are more identified directly with their particular parties, and so it's just taking a lot more overtones that way than you've seen before. Why? Well, it may be in part because Nashville has been such a Democratic town over the years, and all the area around us has become so increasingly red Republican.
And we can discuss that more as the night goes on. I want to talk to Berje now. very anticipated poll coming out. We've seen polls in this race that have been done by various campaigns and released. We've also seen polls where people can go online and vote as often as they would like, and then there is a result, a winner. How is this poll that Channel 5 is doing, that we've hired you to do, how is it different than those polls?
All online polls are essentially non-scientific because they basically violate the major principle of scientific definition of polling, and that is you can't volunteer to do a poll. However, having said that, there are some things that one can do to mitigate the errors that are caused by polls that you offer yourself to do. One of the major things that we did here is make sure that no person could vote twice from the same IP address. So that eliminated the possibility of you going down there and voting 4, 5, 6 times. Just for another...
Unless you had 4 or 5, 6 email addresses.
Unless you had 4 or 5 email addresses, or actually the computer was identified too. It was both the IP address and the computer. So those were a double protection against people voting multiple times. Could some people have done it? Theoretically, yes, but it would have been more difficult than worth the trouble. Number 2, we gathered demographic information so that when the poll data was finalized, we could see how closely it resembled the likely voting population in the runoff. Well, how do we know what the voting population in the runoff is going to be? Well, it's going to be fairly close to what it was in the August 6th election, the first one. Well, how do we know what that looks like? We obtained a list of all the people who had voted in August, on August 6th, 104,000 basically, plus 104,500 something, and we looked at their demographics, their age, their gender, their race, their geographic region, where they were, their voting precinct. And what we did was compared that data to those of all registered voters to see who voted in larger proportion than their population and who voted in less proportion.
I think that's what's very interesting and very important.
Right.
So that's called weighting the data,
right.
And you've weighted it,
right.
Meaning you've given more, you focus more on people that do vote, I guess have a tendency to vote as far as age groups and that kind of thing.
Right.
In other words, older people voted in higher percentages.
Correct.
On August 6th. You would expect they're going to vote in higher percentages on Election Day in September.
That is a reasonable assumption because that's been the case in the past. Now, imagine you're an art teacher and you go into a classroom and say, 10 students, paint to me your mother's or father's picture. And they paint, and you look at them, you say, it's great. I mean, everybody's looks good. And they say, now, let me see a picture. And then you look at the real portrait, and then you can see just how different each painting is from what it should be. Then you can tell that student, you know, this nose is a little too big, this ear is a little out of place, this eyebrow is a little dark. Unless you know what it should look like, you're not going to know whether your sample is good or bad. So the major difference between what we did and what others have done in the past in these type of self-filled polls, is that by the time we get through the weighting process, which involves some 40 major variables, we're going to know how close it is to the actual voters, so that the numbers will more closely resemble those of the runoff election voters, which will be pretty close to what the primary voters look like.
Can I ask one question? How did you measure out in terms of minority vote? I mean, they're not, people on their voter registration don't necessarily have to put I'm white or I'm black. So when you get those names back, how did you figure out how to weight the African American vote? Because a lot of it is in the north part of the county, but there also is a significant amount down in Antioch now.
Right. That can be done, that has to be done by voter registration precinct. We haven't done that, and that's going to be very difficult because 40% of all registered voters in Davidson County have other under race. So we can't guess what the others are going to be. That's going to be actually left, that's a good point, Pat, because that's going to be left out of the weighting process. The only way we can weight is if we have real data, and that's going to be by geographical area, the county, the actual zip code, by age of the respondent, age group. We have actual age, but we've collapsed them into 4 different categories, and gender. Now, we have party affiliation, we have ideology. Unfortunately, we don't have a base on which to compare it to. For example, I can tell you that the number of Republicans and Democrats are virtually identical, the rest being independent. But we don't know what is the actual number of Democrats because we don't register by party. I can tell you that there are more conservative plus moderates than conservative plus liberals. But
so
we don't know what the difference should be.
At this point, all the data is in. You're still just crunching it. You're waiting.
Over 5,000 people responded to the News Channel 5 poll, Yacoubian poll, and we are in the process of weighting it, computer weighting the data with 40 different sub-variables to make sure that the results that we end up with are as closely parallel to the likely runoff voters as possible.
And you have people who took that poll prior to the Channel 5 debate and people who took it afterwards, and you're going to recognize that in how you're doing it so that you can see what changes there might have been in terms of those participating and what they thought about the candidates before that debate on Monday night and what they thought about it afterwards.
Correct.
So what we have to take a break. But what we're going to do tonight is kind of really dive into the information from the August 6th voter profile information, and you have some hint, I guess, of what you're seeing.
You're going to get me in trouble, aren't you?
We won't get too detailed, but there's some hint of what you're seeing in the numbers. So we'll take a break. If you want to call, there's the number. Take a break. Be back right after this.